Hi, my name is Mark Bernot, monetary economist. In this video, I want to talk about the historical parallels with WW2 and what's currently going on in Russia in terms of expansion, geopolitical expansion. I think there's some worthy historical parallels with both Japan and Germany. In Japan, they developed something called the East Asian Greater Co-Prosperity Sphere, or basically the co-prosperity sphere. In Germany, you had an idea, and this idea was under the umbrella of Lebensraum, or living space. And in Russia, in Moscow specifically, they have this idea of the Grushki Mir and building this Eurasian co-prosperity sphere of Lebensraum for the Russians and the Russian idea. Both countries, Germany and Japan, had the idea that they needed to create a sphere of influence and then a buffer zone. And for example, if you know history in the 1940s, 1930s, and it really extended, but I believe, just recalling from college, the Tokugawa regime and the expansion in Japan, 1920s. Many people know Japan from the island hopping of the Allies in the Pacific, but I would say only about 1/4 of the strength of the Japanese were going into the Pacific. Most of it was going on to the Asian mainland. The idea of the Pacific was really to create a buffer zone and to prevent, interdiction into the Japanese mainland. And similarly, Germany was doing that on a more land campaign, and there's a little bit of differences. But they still wanted to, what they did is they forged allies like Hungary, Italy, and Romania. And these were strategic and economic allies. And then they continued to expand, North Africa and where they needed to create like a buffer zone from the mainland. So we've got this idea, but it comes from a central premise that each country feels a little bit superior. The Germans felt a little bit superior. The Japanese felt a little bit superior. And the Russians, they really do believe that they're a little bit superior, at least in Moscow. And from that, they create an ideological reason to expand. They justify it to the free countries through defense of people speaking their own language or culture. The Germans devastated Poland because they felt there were a few German minorities being oppressed, etc., which is obviously the sham that nobody really swallows. I guess some people today swallow it about Russia. I mean, if that's the justification, they should be liberating parts of Miami. So there's a lot of parallel histories between this World War II, but the one striking difference is the Allies called for unconditional surrender out of the Atlantic Conference in 1941 and reiterated and developed conceptually with the Casablanca Conference in 1943. There was an unequivocal call for unconditional surrender. There was no negotiations. And that is my claim, that you cannot negotiate. There is no such thing as making progress, talks, negotiating, or having conversations with the Tsar of Russia. That is an absolute illusion. I don't know if the people making those claims believe it, or they're illiterate to human history, or they don't understand the psychology of a despot, or maybe an abnormal brain formation in that despot. Maybe the brain had too many lesions, capillary telangiectasias, or whatever from, childhood karate and street fights, which is often seen neurologically and clinically, and you can look up, academic studies about that. You have this dichotomy between normal behavior and aggressive behavior and calculated behavior. So I'm not sure why they're calling for something called a talk or a negotiation when you would not do that with the H guy in Germany in the 1940s. I mean, you would not, just call him up on the phone and do that when he's clearly preparing for stage 3 and making V2 rockets with potentially nuclear arms in the future. And metaphorically, Russia, everybody's worried about these nukes, but I'm telling you, and hear me, nukes are the least of the problem. Biologicals are far more powerful. And Ukrainian intelligence obviously zeroed a person in charge of that in Moscow, I think it was last month, as BU for a reason. That dwarfs any nuclear threat, in my opinion. So the question is, again, the Russians are playing for the long term. There's no such thing as negotiation. There's no such thing as talk or making progress. Whenever you hear somebody saying we're making progress, and whenever the Tsar of Russia is feigning like, oh, I really don't want to negotiate, and people are saying and people are thinking, oh, we can convince him with a little more talk and negotiation and carrot and the stick. They don't understand conceptually what is going on here. This is a despot, just like the H guy in Germany or the Asian expansion in Japan. It's a despot, and they do not negotiate. If you think you're making progress, you're deluding yourself. Yeah, I'm not sure, again, if these people are ignorant to history or they really feel like they're making progress or there's another reason. But the term making progress, considering talks, maybe he's not considering talks, is really a strange concept to me, who's somebody who studied history and also knows a little about neurobiology, including lesions in the brain resulting from, actual damage, perhaps from his, Karate Kid childhood. So what I would like to say is, if we take a lesson from history, we have to go back from the original inspiration from people who had ideals and beliefs that there is such thing as right and wrong. And just like the Atlantic Conference and the Casablanca Conference, etc., it has to be a call for unconditional surrender. Unconditional surrender of Moscow. And as I said before, that would include something to the effect of nuclear disarmament, certainly biological disarmament, perhaps occupation and splitting the country up. And you may say that sounds far-fetched or unrealistic, but it isn't actually, because look at Japan and Germany. They're some of our greatest allies today. And the economic benefit from the peace dividend is exponential compared to if we had a negotiation with a dictator. And then you say, well, how are we going to accomplish it? It can't be done. I'll tell you how it can be done. Easy. Very simple. I'm a simple guy. Maybe I'm not too bright, but there's $300 billion in oligarch money. Apply that directly to Ukraine. That's step one. Step two is continue support, including humanitarian aid. Just lift it and give it back to Ukraine. Yep, turn that on. That's how they did it in World War II. And the world was a better place than the free world for a long time after that. So think about this Lebensraum, this Asian co-prosperity sphere, and the despots and the imperialism behind it, and the military adventurism. Did our fathers and grandfathers, people who we respect, think about our grandparents. We had a lot of respect for them. Did they leave it at evil wins and good loses? Did they see it halfway, that evil can take part of the world or portion of the world for their own extraction and exploitation of people? Or they moving, that some people call it the greatest generation. I never liked that term because every generation has the potential to be great. Or they moving to make the world a better place and moving with ideals of something greater. Now you could argue that, the Russians are trying, they're moral people trying. That is the most incorrect argument I've ever seen. It's probably really for another video, because they are not ideologically driven by high ideals, Christianity, orthodoxy, or whatever you may cloak onto that. It's just simple imperialism and evil. call it like it is. And I would like to see Washington, instead of acknowledging that to say that they don't have the ability is really just cowardice. Instead of saying that they can't or we must negotiate, they must say you can't negotiate with a dictator, not because we don't want to, because it's physically not possible. It's like negotiating in my terms with a water moccasin who's coiling up and attacking me in my swamp in Florida. I don't negotiate. You either strike him and he runs, or you run. And Washington's running right now. I want to see Washington, and if anybody in Washington is hearing this, call for an unconditional surrender of Moscow. And if it doesn't happen, then we put the $300 billion in aid as step one, and step two will be a lot bigger. Take a lesson from World War II. Take a lesson from history, and how much economic benefit we get from free exchanges with people who were once our enemy, and we've made them our friends. I mean, that's pretty simple. Dale Carnegie or Norman Vincent Peale. Best way to defeat an enemy is make them your friend. And Russia is not in the friendship mode right now. That's why we have to call for unconditional surrender. My name is Mark Biernot. I'm a monetary economist. Have a great day. Thank you very much.